Have you ever asked yourself why it didn't happen sooner? Why you didn't meet your twin flame when you were younger, when it would have made sense? The truth is, you weren't meant to. The universe was never late. It was protecting you. Because before reunion, both souls must walk separate roads, live through illusions, taste heartbreak, and build strength. You meet later in life, not because you missed your chance, but because destiny was saving the perfect moment. Why twin flames rarely meet young. One of the greatest misconceptions about twin flames is the idea that you missed your chance if you didn't meet them early in life. Many look at the long years of waiting, the failed relationships, the heartbreaks, and wonder, why didn't it happen sooner? But here is the truth. Twin flames rarely meet young. And when they do, separation almost always follows. Why? Because the soul knows timing in a way the human mind cannot understand. When you are young, you are still building an identity. You are still learning how to navigate life, still searching for yourself, still discovering who you are outside of family, society, and conditioning. Meeting your twin flame too early can feel overwhelming, like looking into a mirror before you're ready to see your own reflection. The intensity can be too much. Instead of union, it creates chaos. Instead of growth, it creates collapse. That's why the universe waits. Twin flames are meant to trigger the deepest healing. And healing requires certain foundations to be in place. The masculine often needs to live through years of illusion, pursuing careers, identities, and relationships that may not align with his soul. The feminine, too, must walk her own path, learning sovereignty, discovering her power, and breaking free from the patterns of self-abandonment. These lessons cannot be skipped. They are the very soil that makes reunion possible later. Have you noticed how much stronger you are now compared to who you were years ago? Can you imagine trying to hold this bond back then with the tools you had at the time? You probably would have collapsed under the weight of it. That's why the universe delayed the meeting, not because you were being punished, but because you were being prepared. The soul understands timing differently than the mind. To the mind, later feels like loss. To the soul, later feels like protection. Later means you had time to grow, time to build resilience, time to experience karmic cycles that needed to be completed, time to let go of illusions, so that when the truth arrived, you could actually hold it. The masculine especially would not be ready young. He often has to live through roles that are not authentic, roles imposed by family, culture, or ego. He needs to wear masks until they suffocate him, so that he finally sees they were never real. The feminine, on the other hand, often needs time to learn how not to chase, how not to lose herself, how to become the anchor of alignment. Without these lessons, the connection cannot stabilize. This is why twin flames meet later in life, because by then, both have walked through enough fire to recognize what is real. Both have learned through loss, heartbreak, and endings that nothing else compares. Both are ready to surrender, not from weakness, but from wisdom. And here's the sacred paradox. Meeting later does not mean you lost time. It means you gained strength. Every year apart was not wasted. It was an investment. Every relationship that failed was not a mistake. It was a classroom. Every delay was not punishment. It was divine timing. So if you find yourself asking, why now? Why not before? Remember this, because now you are strong enough to hold it. And Befra, you weren't meant to. The universe was never late. It was right on time. The divine masculine rarely arrives at union without first wearing masks. In his younger years, he builds identities that are not truly his. Identities shaped by society, family expectations, culture, and fear. He tells himself that if he can just achieve enough, earn enough, be admired enough, then he will feel whole. But beneath all of it lies emptiness. For the masculine, youth is often about proving something, proving he can succeed, proving he is strong, proving he can control his life. He throws himself into careers, relationships, or lifestyles that give him the illusion of stability. But none of these roles are authentic. They are costumes, false selves that eventually become too heavy to carry. This is why the twin flame reunion rarely happens early, because in his youth, the masculine is not ready to face the mirror of the feminine. If he looked into her eyes too soon, he would see the truth of who he really is. And that truth would shatter the fragile identities he is still clinging to. Instead of awakening, it would trigger collapse. The connection would feel like a threat, not a gift. Have you noticed this in his journey? That the masculine often runs straight into relationships that lack depth, jobs that consume him, or habits that keep him numb. These are not accidents, they are lessons. He must live through the false to recognize the true. He must wear the mask until it suffocates him, so that he finally rips it off. This is also why so many masculines appear to wake up later in life, not because the feminine was absent, but because his soul knew he had to go through these illusions first. He had to chase success until it felt hollow. He had to pursue relationships until he realized they could never replace the connection. He had to live inside the mask until it broke him open. For the feminine, watching this can be painful. She often sees through his illusions long before he does. She knows the job doesn't fulfill him. The relationship isn't real. The mask doesn't fit. She feels his soul beneath the act. And yet, she has to let him live it. Because without those experiences, he will not arrive at the truth with the depth and clarity that union requires. This is the paradox of his journey. The illusions are necessary. They are not detours. They are preparation. Every false identity is a step toward authenticity. Every collapse of the ego is a step toward the soul. So when you look back and wonder why he chose others, why he ran into distractions, why he seemed blind to the bond, remember this. It wasn't blindness. It was design. His soul led him into those experiences so that when he finally stands before you, he is not half a man wearing a mask. He is whole, stripped, raw, ready. The masculine must walk through his illusions to recognize the feminine as truth. And that recognition is what makes union unshakable. This is why it takes time. This is why meeting later is not delay, but destiny. If the masculine's early years are about illusions and false identity, the feminines are often about self-abandonment. In her youth, she gives too much. She pours herself into relationships, friendships, and family bonds, believing that love means sacrificing her own needs. She confuses devotion with dependency, believing that if she gives enough of herself, others will stay. But this pattern is exactly why the universe delays reunion, because the feminine must learn sovereignty before she can hold the connection. The twin flame bond is not like any other relationship. It cannot survive codependency. It cannot thrive if one is giving everything while the other resists. The connection requires balance, strength, and the ability to stand whole. And this is what the feminine's early years prepare her for. She must walk through heartbreak. She must know what it feels like to give her all and be abandoned. She must face betrayal, loneliness, and the ache of not being chosen. These wounds are not punishments. They are initiations. They teach her what she is not. They strip her of illusions about love being conditional. And through them, she begins to remember that her worth was never in how much she gave away, but in the wholeness she already carried. Have you noticed this pattern in yourself? That the hardest moments of your past were actually what forced you to grow? That the times you thought broke you were the times that made you? This is sovereignty being born, not a cold independence, but a radiant strength that says, I am complete. I choose love not from need, but from truth. This is why the feminine often awakens first, because her journey into sovereignty comes through pain that cannot be ignored. She is forced to stop chasing, to stop clinging, to stop losing herself in the hope of being loved. She learns to pour into herself, to stand tall in her own energy, to embody the divine feminine as sovereign, radiant, magnetic. And this is the version of her that the masculine cannot resist. Not the version that waits desperately, but the version that embodies wholeness. Not the one who tries to hold him together, but the one who stands so steady in her light that he is drawn to align with her. This is why meeting later matters. If the feminine met her masculine too soon, before she had learned sovereignty, she would collapse under the weight of his resistance. She would chucks, beg, and bleed, and the bond would spiral into chaos. But by the time the reunion truly comes, she has already learned to anchor herself. She knows how to hold her own vibration steady. She no longer sees him as her completion, but as her mirror. For the masculine, this sovereignty is shocking. He cannot control it. He cannot manipulate it. He cannot escape it. Because sovereignty is magnetic. It calls him into truth without words, without force, and that call is irresistible. So understand this: your early pain was not wasted. Every heartbreak, every abandonment, every night you cried yourself to sleep was shaping you into sovereignty. It was preparing you to stand, not in desperation, but in power. The feminine's sovereignty is not just for her. It is the anchor of union. Without it, the connection cannot stabilize. With it, the connection becomes unbreakable. This is why twin flames meet later, because the feminine had to remember her wholeness first. And once she does, union is no longer built on dependency. It is built on destiny. One of the deepest reasons twin flames meet later in life is because of karmic cycles. Both the masculine and the feminine are required to live through lessons that can not be skipped, lessons that are sometimes painful, sometimes confusing, but always essential. These karmic ties are not detours, they are classrooms, and without walking through them, neither soul would be prepared to hold the power of reunion. For the masculine, karmic cycles often take the form of relationships that mirror his wounds. He may find himself with partners who trigger his fears of inadequacy, abandonment, or rejection. He may choose people who reflect his own unhealed shadows, who expose his pride, who test his ability to open his heart. These connections are not mistakes. They are mirrors that reveal the very places where he resists love. Until he learns these lessons, he cannot fully see the feminine for who she is. For the feminine, karmic cycles are often about learning boundaries. She may attract partners who drain her, betray her, or dismiss her worth. She may enter relationships where she gives endlessly, only to receive little in return. As painful as these experiences are, they force her to awaken. They teach her the difference between unconditional love and self-abandonment. They show her that love cannot mean losing herself. Through karmic lessons, she learns to choose herself, a sovereignty that later anchors the entire connection. Have you noticed how every relationship before your twin flame carried a lesson? How each heartbreak, no matter how devastating, showed you something about your own strength. That is the essence of karmic cycles. They strip away illusions. They make you face wounds you would otherwise avoid. They push you to grow in ways you never would have chosen on your own. The truth is, if you met your twin flame before completing these cycles, the bond would be too overwhelming. The masculine would run harder, unable to face himself in her mirror. The feminine would chase harder, unable to stop losing herself in his silence. The result would be destruction, not union. That's why the universe delays. Because the bond is too sacred to be wasted on unprepared hearts. Karmic lessons also serve another purpose. They burn away attachment to the false. By living through cycles of betrayal, rejection, or emptiness, both counterparts come to recognize what is real. They begin to feel the difference between love that drains and love that heals, between connection that is shallow and connection that transforms. Without contrast, you cannot appreciate truth. Without karmic lessons, you cannot recognize the soul. This is why meeting later is protection, because by then, both have lived enough cycles to know nothing else compares. No other connection carries the depth, the recognition, the magnetic pull. The karmic lessons don't diminish the bond. They prepare the soul to finally surrender to it. So if you wonder why you had to endure so much before reunion, trust this. Every heartbreak was a teacher. Every delay was an initiation. Every karmic cycle was clearing space in your soul for what was always meant to arrive. Meeting later doesn't mean you lost time. It means the time was used wisely to strip away everything false so that only truth remains. How experience strengthens the bond. At first glance, it may feel discouraging that twin flames often meet later in life. You might think of all the lost years, the missed opportunities, the moments you could have shared together. But the truth is this: those years apart were not wasted. They were the very foundation that now makes your bond stronger. Experience deepens the connection. Every heartbreak you endured, every challenge you faced, every illusion you walked through, all of it has shaped you into someone capable of holding a love this intense. Without those experiences, the bond would have been too heavy, too overwhelming. But now you carry wisdom, you carry resilience, you carry the clarity that only comes from living. Think about the feminine. Her sovereignty was not born from ease. It was forged through pain, the betrayals, the abandonment, the nights of crying in silence. They forced her to turn inward, to find strength where she once only found weakness. By the time she meets or reunites with the masculine later in life, she is no longer fragile. She is anchored. She is whole. And that wholeness is what allows her to hold the intensity of union without collapsing. The masculine, too, gains strength through experience. His illusions may have consumed years, but each false identity, each hollow relationship, each failed attempt at fulfillment showed him what is not real. By the time he faces the feminine again, he carries the wisdom of emptiness. He knows what doesn't work. He knows what cannot satisfy. And this knowledge drives him toward truth. Have you noticed how different you are now compared to who you were years ago? Would the younger version of you have been able to stand in front of this mirror without running, without doubting, without breaking? Probably not. But now, with the weight of your experiences behind you, you stand stronger. You recognize the bond for what it is. You no longer confuse it with infatuation, obsession, or fantasy. You know its depth because you have seen the shallow. This is why meeting later is not delay, but divine design. The years apart carved you into the versions of yourselves that can actually hold the connection, the feminine, no longer a chaser, but a sovereign anchor, the masculine, no longer lost in illusions, but stripped of falsehoods. Together, the bond is not fragile, it is unbreakable. Experience also humbles the soul. Without it, pride and ego would dominate the connection. But when you have tasted failure, when you have walked through endings, when you have faced the emptiness of what you thought would fulfill you, humility is born, and humility is what makes surrender possible. The bond is stronger now, not despite the years apart, but because of them. Every cycle, every karmic tie, every heartbreak was preparation. You weren't losing time, you were gathering strength. you weren't being punished. You were being prepared. So release the idea that you are late. You are right on time, because now, when union comes, it will not collapse under pressure. It will stand. It will last. Your experiences didn't delay the connection. They fortified it. Divine timing is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the twin flame journey. To the human mind, it feels cruel. It feels like waiting, like delay, like punishment. You wonder why the universe would bring such an intense love into your awareness only to keep it apart from you. But what the soul knows, and what the heart eventually realizes, is that divine timing is not punishment. It is protection. The truth is simple. If reunion came before its time, it would not last. Both the masculine and the feminine would still be carrying illusions, unhealed wounds, and karmic attachments that would collapse the bond under its own intensity. Divine timing ensures that when you meet or when you reunite, the foundation is strong enough to hold it. This is why the universe allows the cycles of separation. This is why it orchestrates karmic partners, false starts, and long stretches of silence. Not because you are being forgotten, but because you are being prepared. Timing matters. Alignment matters. And the reunion of twin flames is too sacred to be rushed. Have you noticed how everything in your life seems to rearrange itself just before major shifts in your connection? Jobs ending, friendships dissolving, sudden changes in where you live or how you feel about yourself. These are not accidents. They are the universe clearing space. Divine timing moves the pieces in ways you cannot always see, but always feel. For the masculine, divine timing is about being stripped of resistance. He cannot meet the feminine in truth until his illusions collapse. And illusions rarely collapse without years of chasing them. He must live them, exhaust them, and finally realize they cannot replace the bond. Only then does he soften. Only then is he ready. For the feminine, divine timing is about sovereignty. She cannot anchor the union until she has learned to choose herself. And she cannot learn that without walking through the pain of self-abandonment. Only when she remembers her wholeness can she hold the connection without collapsing into dependency. Divine timing is the great equalizer. It ensures that when reunion comes, it is not too soon and not too late. It is the moment when both souls have gathered the strength, the clarity, and the humility to surrender fully. This is why twin flames so often meet later in life. Because by then, the timing is right. Not because the love wasn't real before, but because the foundation wasn't ready. The love was always there. The bond was always pulling. But the vessel, the human self, had to be prepared. So if you are in the waiting, if you feel like time is slipping away, remember this. Divine timing is not about delay. It is about precision. It is the universe ensuring that when union comes, it will last. Later doesn't mean less. Later means aligned. Later means unshakable. Later means true. At the end of all the questions, all the waiting, all the wandering paths, there is one truth. It was always leading here. The delays were never detours. The karmic cycles were never mistakes. The heartbreaks, the endings, the loneliness, none of it was wasted. Every moment was part of a greater design, preparing you both for the reunion your souls had already chosen. This is the paradox of the twin flame journey. It feels chaotic, unpredictable, and unfair to the mind. But to the soul, it is perfectly orchestrated. Each separation carved strength. Each false relationship exposed illusions. Each delay built the foundation for something unshakable. By the time you meet later in life, you are not the same people you once were. You are wiser. You are stronger. You are ready. For the masculine, the journey through illusions was necessary. He had to chase what wasn't real until he was exhausted. He had to build identities that crumbled so he could finally stand in truth. He had to lose himself so he could find himself reflected in the feminine's eyes. Without that path, he would not recognize her when the time came. For the feminine, the journey into sovereignty was essential. She had to give too much so she could learn to hold herself. She had to break so she could discover her wholeness. She had to love in ways that abandoned herself so she could finally learn that real love begins within. Without that sovereignty, she could not anchor the union. And together, both paths converge. The masculine stripped of illusions, the feminine anchored in her truth. Both souls ready, not out of desperation, but out of alignment. That is why the reunion feels different later in life. It is not fragile anymore. It is not a storm of chasing and running. It is a meeting of equals, a meeting of mirrors, a meeting of souls that recognize each other fully. Have you felt this inevitability? That deep knowing in your heart that no matter how far apart you wandered, it was always going to lead back here. That's because your soul has always known. The details of time may have been hidden from you, but the outcome was never in question. This is not about being late. It was never late. It was always perfect. The union comes at the moment when it can actually last, when the foundation is strong enough, when the lessons are complete, when both are ready to surrender fully. That is divine timing. That is destiny. So, as you reflect on your journey, the years apart, the pain, the waiting, let your heart rest in this truth. It was all preparation. The path was not random, it was sacred. And now you stand on the edge of the very thing your soul has been moving toward all along. The reunion is not the end of the story, it is the beginning of living as one soul in two bodies, fully awakened, fully aligned. It was always leading here.